Hey guys, my name is Ismas. Welcome to another Blender tutorial. This time we're going to be looking at how I made these two buildings in Blender 2.8. I can see there is this here. So this is still work in progress, but I thought I could just go through over how I made these two buildings. I'm planning to make them as game assets, and I will be removing these see-through windows and replace them with image textures of actual windows. And yeah, so you can see the texturing also needs some bit of scaling down to match the size of the building and things like that. But yeah, I thought I could just go through what I just do an overview of how I got to make these buildings, these two apartment buildings. Maybe I could start with this because this is much more simpler, and maybe I'll talk about the materials, the material setup and texturing of both the buildings, and maybe some bit of lighting if time allows it. So yeah, let's begin with the modeling part here. This was very easy because there's a lot of repetition here, and I thought an array system is really useful when it comes to making buildings of this style that have multiple floors that look the same. So that is what I use. So if we go to layout mode here, you can see I use the array modifier. So I modeled the first floor or the ground floor. So if I turn off the array, you can see this is what I had. Very simple and basic. And I also use the mirror modifier because you can see there is a symmetry. This building has symmetry, so there was no need for me to build both sides. So I used the mirror modifier to model the other side as I was working on this other side. Yeah, so then I added the array modifier, so you can make this as tall as you want, but because the top or the first floor was different, I made it a separate object so that I can just slap it on top of the building to make it different from the other floors. But still I used the mirror modifier on that as well, so that I can just use, so that it can just be duplicated on the other side. And for the materials, that was easy. So I used PBR textures. So if we go to shading, I used PBR textures, and so you can see the material setup here. I have one for the concrete, a ceiling. I didn't really name them that well, but so just for seal, turn off some of these. Maybe just have a look at only this. So this is so I had this concrete texture. Let me make sure that I'm selecting that. I think this is the texture. Yeah, so this is the concrete texture. It was a bit bright for me, so I used a color. Let me see. Yeah, I think so. It was a PBR texture, but I didn't like the diffuse. So what I did, I just used a mixed color node and used that as the color for the principal shader, and I just used the normal map and the roughness of this map to affect the roughness and the normal input. Then for the color, what I did, if you look at the corners of this building, let me turn off overlays, you can see they're a bit dark. That's because I used this. Let me change this. Let me first brighten up this. I used the new ambient occlusion input to make those corners darker, to make the ambient occlusion more pronounced than what you would get by default. So if I don't have, so if I didn't have this turned on, you see that's the ambient occlusion you get without using this ambient occlusion input. So it's a bit light for me, it's not dark enough. So what I did is I used this new ambient occlusion input, and how you get that is you hit Shift A, then input ambient occlusion, and this is how it looks, just the ambient occlusion. You can see it makes dark corners darker, but I didn't think it was pronounced enough for me. So what I did is I used the math input. So if you go to convert math, you can multiply whatever value you're getting using the multiply operator. I think I used what value here? 0.9. Yeah. So this is without the multiply. This is without with, and you can see you can control the amount like that. Because I tried to control the amount of ambient occlusion from here using distance, but I couldn't see any effect. So you see it's at 0 now, but there's no difference between that and 1. So I use the multiply value here to control the brightness, and then I also use the power operator. So if we duplicate this, this is all to give me more control over what I'm doing here. You can see you can make those corners really dark or bright or less dark, so something like that. And then you can add a color mix RGB to mix the ambient occlusion. Set it to multiply. Make sure that is the bottom input, and then set the color, the blending mode to multiply, and then you can set any color you want here. And if you want to use an image texture, you can feed that in the second color input, so the ambient occlusion will be overlaid on top of that texture. So you can also control how much amount you want, like that. And you can also come back to these values and change those values as well. So that's what I did to get those dark corners, but I didn't like this color image, so instead I just used a plain color. But wait for this to load. This made this dark, and when you bring back the lights, I think it looks really good. For this ceiling texture, for the ceiling, I used a leather texture. So let me show you how that looks. I used a leather texture like that. But because the camera is going to be a bit far, I didn't spend a lot of time on that. I just used that and maybe the normal map, and yeah, also added some ambient occlusion to have those dark corners that you see there, to have them more pronounced. And the windows didn't have anything that complicated. It's also just a plain color, and then a glass, a principal, a shader. By the way, I'm working in Blender EV, so if you're wondering how I'm able to preview this very fast, I'm working in Blender EV. And you can also make sure that in the render settings you have screen space reflections turned on, and ambient occlusion turned on as well. If you want to have the bloom effect, you can also turn on that to get that effect. And if it's too much, you can just increase increase the threshold a bit to cut out some of that bloom, like that. So those were the materials. The textures again, that's PBR textures. I already have a tutorial on how to use PBR textures, so I won't repeat that part there. So for this orange part, I still used, I think it's not that realistic, but if you are rendering this from a distance, I think it really cool. It really looks cool, like that. You can see everything is just repeated here. So for the lights, that is also simple. What I did is I made these holes for the lights. I don't have anything there, but I made a selection of those areas and assigned a new material, emission material, to those spots. So let me make sure it's on the surface. You can see we have an emission material there. So that's why we're getting that light. But I don't think it wasn't giving off enough light. It was only giving it in some spots around there. So see, if I hide this light here, you can see it's just giving it off around there, and I wanted this entire area to be lit, so that's why I have those lights in there. So basically that is it for this building, the texturing, materials, and the modeling. Then when we come to this, it's the same principle, but what I did for this building, I wanted to make it modular, so I didn't model the entire floor and then make repeat, and then I duplicate the floors with an array system, because you can see the base floor is a bit different. If you look at the windows, these are much wider, and these ones are split between, and also these ones are a bit different. So there is some sort of variation between every floor you see, and you can see the top as well is also different. So I couldn't just use an array system to duplicate all the floors that are going to be used. So what I did is I just used the array modifier for just a one wall like this, and maybe duplicated this to this side and this side and this side, so that if I wanted to make this different, this side different, or if I wanted, you can say this is not, so if I wanted this to be longer, I would just increase the array count in that direction, so just like that, and increase this as well. So I could make this long as I want. Like that. This is just a separate, completely separate object. The materials are really basic. Again, I use the same trick to make these dark corners more dark using the ambient occlusion node. But this time I multiplied it with the texture color node. Is it this? Okay, this is the ambient occlusion for the texture. So this is the color. So I mix them to have them look like this. Same with every texture. And the thing about this is that I didn't have to go on. I just had to work on only one of these. So you can see one block like this. So let me turn off mirror, turn off array. I only had to work on one block like this, and if you turn on mirror, you can see we have that. Then we have, if you turn on array, you have the entire row textured. So if I was to change anything here. So maybe let me assign a different material to this. Maybe give it the concrete. You can see it's being repeated all over that. Let me undo that. So it's just using PBR textures and feeding them to the right principal shader and nodes to get the effect you want. So I duplicated this to this side. You can see this wall is separate. So if you wanted this to be just a thin building, you would just reduce the array count for this. Maybe move this. Yeah, you get the point. You don't really have to go through that. But so for this side here, I don't know. I think the texture is missing or something. Okay, this is a bug. Shouldn't look like this. Let me just assign a different texture, which I think looks better as well. So this also I used the array modifier to duplicate that block vertically, and for the window frames there, what I did, I used the scaling modifier. I think I did a tutorial on how to use the scaling modifier, but I will show you quickly what I did to make those frames that you see there very easily. So let me just show you this exactly. Maybe let me get this here. Hide. I'll go to layout, make sure that I'm in object mode. I'll duplicate this. So what I did is let me first turn off these modifiers that we don't need. So I only needed the frame to be on this block, this part here. So I just deleted everything else to remain with that. And when you go to the modifiers, you can add the skinning modifiers, skin modifier, and you can see right now the bevel for those edges is too big. So when you go to edit mode, select everything, Ctrl A, and make sure you are in vertex mode. Okay, I'm not sure why it's not showing up here. These are supposed to be previewable in vertex mode. I don't know why they're not. Let me open up a new project. I don't know. This one is buggy, I think. So just assume this is the block we want to work on, and this is the frame we are working on. If we add the skin modifier, you see it gives every edge that kind of bevel or skin or depth that it has. And when you go to edit mode, you can see you still see everything. If we turn on wireframe, you can see and go to edge mode and hit Ctrl A, you can scale the size of those bevels. So let me turn back to solid mode, Ctrl A. You can scale back that to have that, and it will create this kind of mesh object. I don't know why this is not showing up in edit mode, because I don't know. It should show so. But I think if I use Ctrl A, then push back, they should reduce in size, and this is what you get. So if you want to add another row of bar here, you just add a loop like that, and when you go back to edit mode, you can see you have that. If you want to remove this, again, you just, okay, what is going on? I'm not sure what happened there, but I think I hit that. So if you want to remove any of these, you just delete the entire loop, edge loop, like that. If you want to remove this, you have that, and then I just move that there. So maybe just duplicate this, and the second one you just remove the modifier. That's what you remain with. So you give the frame a different material, and the second part you give a different material as well. Let me see what else can I explain here. Again, this is also modular, so what you could do is remove this or make a duplicate of this building. And remember to turn off some of this. And you can remove this part and just increase the array count for this, not in that direction, but in what direction? Okay, in the y direction, negative y direction. And you basically have a different building, so you also make an array for this, and then push this, and you will have a totally different building. So maybe just use take Z 90 degrees, negative 90 degrees. Yeah, you get the point. So that's how I made the two buildings. Thank you for watching.